police had to move in quickly to keep those two groups apart. And I tell you the story because you asked the question about a change in what was going on at that time, and this was the year before Woodstock. Well, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was assigned to go up into Harlem, and as I pulled off the Harlem River Drive at 135th Street, the entire place was literally burning down. The African-American community was so grief-stricken that they had to do something to express themselves, and unfortunately they were torching some of their own businesses and some of their own buildings.
Right.
When I pulled onto a street, I saw the fire department was literally taking one pumper, racing to a place, spraying it, stopping it, and then running to another place. That's how much anger there was. And a couple of weeks later, I was standing on a hillside in Atlanta, Georgia, with Coretta King as they laid Martin Luther King to rest. Well, that was one experience. And just a couple of months later, Bobby Kennedy was shot and killed in California. And I was back at St. Patrick's a few days later as his body lay in state. And then we had, in 1968, the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. And I was there also. And I watched as the National Guard troops ringed Grant Park, where the anti-war demonstrators were protesting. And when I looked into the helmet of one of these National Guard troops, I realized he was an 18-year-old kid or a 20-year-old kid scared to death, wondering if he'd have to use his gun. All of that set the stage for a tremendous amount of change going on that eventually brought us to Woodstock. Now, previous to Woodstock, and you mentioned it, was July 20th, 1969, just about 3 or 4 weeks before Woodstock, and I was in Central Park with a crowd of 10 or 20,000 watching on giant TV screens as Neil Armstrong said, this is a one step for man and a giant leap for mankind.
Right.
And then a few weeks later, there was Woodstock.
All within a span of about a year and a half. Amazing.
Less than 2 years.
Yeah.
You know.
That's a career right there.
Well, I've had a great career that way. I've covered stories from Central Park to China to climbing into the bunkers on the Golan Heights, overlooking Israel, the Syrian bunkers. I've interviewed people. I've interviewed the guy who was the American commandant of Spandau prison, where Rudolf Hess, the deputy Führer, was kept. A commander named Colonel Eugene Byrd was a man who wrote a book called "The Loneliest Man in the World," Prisoner Number 7, because in Berlin, after World War II, they kept Rudolf Hess by himself in that prison until he died. So I've been in East Berlin, I've been in East Germany. I've had a very, very good career that way.
Do you have any tapes? Do you keep all your tapes, Mike, of those
I have
stories?
tried to, Doug, but...
I'd love to do a retrospective on the radio.
When you do it for 48 years, 47 years, it's very tough. And I've kept some of the stuff. As a matter of fact, and we could bring that right to the present day, when the way we got out of Woodstock was to, I made a deal with the state police, and they're the only ones. You got to realize we're going back to 1969, and there weren't cell phones and satellites and all that. I had to get the story out back to WNEW. And the only way I could do that, having had half an hour's notice and then being dropped into the middle of this thing, I made a deal with the state police. And here was the deal. When I got on the ground, and I was trying to get my bearings, a big young guy comes by with a box on his shoulder. And I said to him, "What's that?" He says, "You the guy who ordered this?" I said, "Well, what is it?" He says, "These are the corned beef and pastrami sandwiches from Kaplan's down in Monticello." And immediately I heard that. I immediately whipped out $10, and I said, "Yeah, here, kid, here's a tip." And I took this whole big box of sandwiches. I went over to the state police trailer, and I made a deal with them. I said, look, you got a bunch of phone lines going out of here. I got to get the story out. You let me use one of your phone lines and your lavatory, and I'll supply you with sandwiches for the weekend. And they went for it. So that's how I was able to get the story out. You know, Doug, you remember, most people don't realize some of the technical parts, but back in the old days when you had the round handsets, you could unscrew the mouthpiece, and there were two little clips there, and you could clip your tape recorder onto those clips and use your microphone and feed tape and do whatever you had to do. Well, that's what I did for 2 days. We didn't sleep for 2 days and 2 nights. But to get out of there because of the crowds, we made a deal with a state trooper to put us in his car, and we sirened our way back to the airport and then chartered a little plane and came back down here to LaGuardia. I brought back loads of tape from stuff that I'd done. And our producers that following week produced a beautiful radio documentary called Weekend at White Lake, the Woodstock Festival. And I don't know if most people remember this, but remember, Woodstock did not occur at Woodstock. It occurred 100 miles to the west and south in the little hamlet of White Lake in the township of Bethel in Sullivan County, New York. Well, that documentary, which was produced by some very talented people who went on, ironically, to the networks and all that, was trotted out every 5 years. And about 2 years ago, Doug, I don't know if did I mention to you what's up there now? By the way, up at that site.
I know there's a kind of a museum. I think you're part of the introduction to that, right?
13 years ago, a billionaire named Alan Gary, made his money in cable television, bought the entire Max Eisgrau farm. As a matter of fact, 2,000 acres. He has dumped more than $100 million into the site to create a performing arts center like the famous Tanglewood in Massachusetts or Ravinia north of Chicago. There's a huge shed performing stage there. There's a 4,800-seat audience on a hillside, and behind that audience, room for 12,000 more people. They bring up everybody from rock groups to the New York Philharmonic, and this year, the Boston Pops. Well, part of that complex is a gorgeous digital museum that tells the story of the 15th, 16th, and 17th, and 18th of August of 1969. It has a psychedelic school bus. It has all sorts of paraphernalia and posters, and it has little kiosks where 2 or 3 people can sit on a bench and push a button, and you will see a video of different aspects of that weekend. How much it cost, what about the mud, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. By the way, there were 3 deaths during that weekend and 2 births. In any event, part of that digital museum is an IMAX film, 11-minute film. And the first voice you hear on that film is mine saying, and now you'll remember, this site is hard to believe. We're over the top of the hill now and over the main stage, and for perhaps as far as half a mile, all you can see are people. So, Doug, if I'm not here anymore, you can go up there and you can listen to this voice that doesn't seem to stop.
Well, when you come back down, I know you're down here for part of the year. Bring whatever tapes you have, because I'd love to do
I will take a look. And,
in depth.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, this past week, if I can go on, Bill Deal, who is my closest friend and has retired as an ABC Radio News correspondent after 37 years. More than 25 of them, Bill has been their entertainment correspondent. So he's done all the stars and all that sort of stuff, the Britney Spears, and he does...